Chains can bind us, but they can also be broken. Today, we're going to explore how you can reclaim your voice, your life, and your freedom. Hi, I'm Anita. Welcome to Extraordinary Moments with Anita, where people share stories that make them unstoppable. Today's topic resonates with so many people, far too many people, if I must say. It's about breaking free from toxic relationships, abusive relationship. If you are trapped in such a relationship, know that you are not alone. You can break free. And that's why I'm so super excited that we're having this topic today. I'm honored to welcome back a familiar face to Extraordinary Moments with Anita, Billy. Last time she was here, she shared her story of unmasking the narcissist, and today she's sharing how to break free from abusive and a toxic relationship. Let's dive into Billy's journey, her practical advice, and the steps you need to take to break free from a toxic and abusive relationship.
Thank you, Anita. It's lovely to be back again. Thank you for having me back on your channel. It was a great time last time. It was a bit long, I know, but it was great.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you're here. For people who are yet to watch, the last episode to understand your story, can you just share a bit of your story so we get to know?
Sure. So what we discussed in our last video is part of my story is I went through narcissistic abuse. I was in a marriage for 24 years, and then I had gotten involved in another relationship that turned out to have high narcissistic traits. And because it is a hot topic right now, narcissism is all over. I think that it's important we share our stories, and my story happened at a time when it was not a hot topic. So I did not even know that I was in it until 2021, which is 4 years ago. So part of my story is that I didn't know what I was in. And so this is my heart and passion. And that's why I'm so thankful for people like you that give us this platform to share, unmasking, like we did in the last video. I shared red flags. We talked about things to look for, boundaries, talking about boundaries, how to protect yourself more from a situation like that. And so that's the biggest part of my story was 24 years I didn't know that I was in it. So
that still always amazes me how you lived through that. For all that many years.
Yes. And I thought that it was just like, okay, well, maybe everybody's going through this. Maybe it's, or, and I mentioned this in the last video, is a lot of people, whether it's the man that's with a woman that has those characteristics and that personality, or the woman,
the other way around,
it's, you begin to ask yourself, is it me? Is there something wrong with me? Am I doing something wrong?
Am I the problem?
Am I the problem? Right? Because the gaslighting, which we talked about, can make you feel that it's you, right? And they're very manipulative as well. So it can make you question your own reality. And so I went through that for those 24 years. I went through a divorce in 2021 because I became empowered with the knowledge. When I discovered it and started reading about it and learning about it, it empowered me. That was my knowledge.
Is power.
It is. And that's when I was able to start taking the steps to leave. And I left, and I moved to another city at the time, started a new job, and basically started my life all over again from scratch. And here I am 4 years, almost 5 years later, and God is so good. So many great things have happened. And you know about my motorcycle. I just got my motorcycle license a year ago, and I was out all day for a little bit,
That was what we used for the flyer, the
yes,
website.
yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
So, there is hope after narcissistic abuse. I do want to say that, a lot of people feel like it's such unless you've been through it, it's so hard to explain to people, the damage it can do to you. But thank God, if it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be where I am now. It'd take much longer, and it would just, so that's a real quick wrap up of my story.
Thank you so much for that. It was, I'm really so happy for you that you were able to break free. Not many people can do that or have been able to do that. And that's why I'm so glad that we're having this discussion today.
Yes.
To let people know that they're not alone. If
that's
you're still there, it doesn't matter how long, you've been there. For you, you were married to him for 21 years and then
together 24.
24, yeah. And you might think that was too long, but here you are free.
Yes.
So I'm really grateful and thankful to God that you were able to break free.
Me too.
And you. I would like you to share some steps, on how people can break free. So over to you.
Okay, well, I have about 4 steps that I feel are the most crucial in getting out of one of these relationships, and they worked for me. So that's why I'm going to speak to those, because that worked for me. And it's important to mention, Anita, that although narcissism, it's a textbook type of personality disorder. There's 2 types, and I mentioned this in the last video as well. There's those that have narcissistic personality disorder, and then there are those who have high narcissistic traits. The NPD is the clinical term that they use. That's a clinical diagnosis, and there are 9 narcissistic traits in psychology. There are 9 traits of a narcissist.
Can you quickly run through them?
If I can remember them all. But there are, and we talked a bit about the red flags, and those are some of the ones there is. So one of the biggest traits a narcissist has, and they say that if somebody is displaying 5 of those narcissistic traits out of the 9, then it's a very baseline diagnosis for NPD. It's there's still some research being done around it, but that has been the model for a long time to diagnose NPD. Okay, as opposed to someone who's just really narcissistic, right? So 5 out of 9 is the diagnosis for NPD. Okay. Now, everybody, like we said last time, everyone has some narcissism. It's normal. A lot of us have it. In fact, it can be healthy. That's what helps you to set boundaries, and you learn to say no and take care of yourself, right? So 5 traits that I'll mention that are pretty important things that you'll notice missing or something that's there is the first one is no empathy, okay? This is significant because, and that was one of the hardest parts for me in my marriage, in my relationship, in my marriage, was that I had a hard time understanding how if I'm crying or having a hard time and he's just looking at me and like, stop crying, or just very dismissive. So they're very dismissive when you're emotional. If you're having a difficult time, going through something, and you're expressing yourself and you're emotional and, you're crying or you're just frustrated, it makes them very uncomfortable. Whereas if right now you and I are talking and you start to share, some emotional situation you've been in and you start to get emotional, my natural instinct is to comfort you, right? You want to comfort that person and or hug them or be like, oh my goodness,
make
are
them
you
feel
okay?
Make them feel loved,
Yes. And so with narcissism, the lack of empathy is very high. So that's one thing you will notice, is that you're going through something difficult, and what's normal for most people to show support to you, that won't be there. That won't be there. You will not get empathy. It could be something physical. You could hurt yourself. You could go through something traumatic, and they won't be able to show that emotion. You know, they may do something to help you in that moment, pick you up, and this is where people have a hard time believing us, okay? Because if you've been through narcissistic abuse, you'll know that a lot of people have a difficult time understanding your story. In fact, many times as you tell your story to people, they'll think it's a movie because it just sounds so unbelievable,
unreal,
right? So one way that a narcissist can show their lack of empathy, and it's very evident, is if you get hurt. Say you drop something on your foot, and that natural instinct of me saying, "Oh my gosh, are you okay, Anita?"
Yeah.
Right? Their instinct would be more like, well, pay attention. What were you doing? What were you thinking? Well, you know what? Yeah, well, next time maybe you'll pay attention. Or next time maybe you won't leave that sitting there next time.
Not even a simple sorry?
No, nothing. So that's the kind of reactions you can get from them in a situation. And, you know, when you're going through it, right? When you're living with them, when you're married to them, or you're dating someone for a long time, because I also went through that situation as well. There's sometimes you're just like, what? Like, was that normal? Yeah. Like, I wouldn't have done that. You begin to
question yourself, right?
You do. You start to think, like, that just doesn't seem right. Like, could you show some consideration or show some compassion, right? So that's another way you see that their lack of empathy. If someone gets hurt, instead of them, you know, running to your rescue or trying to help you, they're going to get mad. They get mad. They get frustrated. And it's because part of the reason is narcissists, and I know we talked about this in the last video, most narcissistic people, the foundation of narcissism comes from shame. So shame comes with guilt as well. So if something were to happen to you, it's an accident. Yeah. Accidents happen, right? I mean, you know, you spill the milk sometimes. It just happens. Yeah. Because the narcissist or the person that's been through that and has that personality disorder or high narcissistic traits, more than likely there's been abuse in their past. They were abused as well. Okay. And more than likely by a narcissistic parent. Oh, wow. So what's happened is they've developed those behaviors over time. And that's why diagnosing narcissistic personality disorder can be difficult. Because sometimes it's just that child grew up into an adult who developed those patterns, but they may not necessarily have narcissistic personality disorder. They just have high narcissistic traits.
But because they have lived in an environment or a family that has that, you know, so it becomes normal to them.
Well, they adapt it. Yeah, they kind of take it on. Like how, you know, if your dad and mother have blue eyes and you just happen to be born with blue eyes, right? It's the same growing up in that type of environment with a narcissist. Now, it doesn't always mean you're going to become a narcissist if you have a narcissistic parent. What can also happen is the opposite. And that happened in my case, is I became what's called codependent, right? Okay. So you become a people pleaser where you're the opposite of the narcissist. Your way of controlling your emotions and what happens around you is by pleasing and fixing. You know, you'll hear a lot of people talk about, you know, oh, you like to fix people. You can't fix anybody. You can't change people. Well, that was my issue, is that I became codependent because in my dynamics with my mother, she created that codependency by leaning on me at a very young age for support emotionally, which a child should not have, right? So that's where codependency can develop, right? So getting back to the narcissist, when they're angry, when frustrated, when something happens, or they see people crying, they get angry when they see you cry too, because they can't process those emotions. They were never, ever able to process those emotions. And the reason for that is because as a child, when they went through the abuse, if they were abused, in most cases with NPD or high narcissism, that person was abused. They suffered trauma at some point. It may not have come from the family.
Yeah.
It could have came from another person's family or friends or, you know, some organization, like even church, sometimes it can happen, right? There can be trauma or abuse. And so what happens is they don't develop emotionally as that child. It's almost like their emotion has been locked off at that point of trauma in their life. And as a child, you can understand, how do you process emotions? Most of us as adults are still learning how to cope with our emotions, but a child,
I mean, let alone a child, you know,
right? And they've been traumatized. And if they don't have parents that are supportive or that are emotionally available or equipped to deal with it, what happens? That child, their emotional development becomes arrested. They don't develop emotionally. And so you will hear psychologists and professors who study narcissism, you will hear them say that a narcissist, if you pay attention and you've lived with them or been married to them, which I know 100% of the viewers that have will tell you, they are very immature emotionally. Okay. What does a toddler do? They have no self-control. They throw fits. They rage. They break things. They throw things. They scream and yell. This is a portrait of a full-grown narcissist who's an adult.
Even as an adult. Oh, wow.
Yes, man or woman.
Yeah, it could be both.
Either way, right? And so that's one of the biggest traits of narcissism. When you're looking at the 9, no empathy is one of them. The other trait would be very, very self-centered, very me. Okay, they are all about themselves, so they're very selfish. They're very like grandiose, like it's all about them, very egocentric. The ego is very fragile with a narcissist.
So you have to be very careful not to break it.
They're very, very difficult to give constructive feedback to. They don't like being corrected at all.
So they're kind of set in their own ways.
Yes.
So it's either my way or
rigid.
no. Yeah.
Very rigid. It's a very rigid personality. And even though you might be just, you know, like just normally tell them, oh yeah, no, look, put it this way, that looks better, and it's normal, you're working together. They don't see it that way. They're taking that as you are insulting them or slighting them, and they don't like it, and they will retaliate. They'll get angry very quickly. Any form of criticism is an assault to their ego. And you'll know it. They'll show you either by a look of contempt, they'll look at you a certain way, and you'll feel it. You'll be like, like, okay, right? Like you'll feel that energy, right? And you'll know something has shifted. And it's because their ego, you attack their ego. Yes. Another one would be grandiose, okay? Many narcissists are very physically focused, right? And we're not talking about health and fitness and taking care of the temple of God. We're supposed to do that. Yeah. People that work out are not narcissists, or people that like to take pictures. So
you don't go out and say, "Oh,
right?
I'm walking outside, right?"
Right? Or people that I know,
no, you're
right?
not.
No, if you like to take pictures of yourself, like selfies, people that take selfies all the time, unless they're doing 100 a day and that's all they post, they may have definitely narcissistic traits, but it doesn't mean you're narcissistic. We're talking about people, they may not even take selfies. A lot of narcissists are very, very quiet and private. They don't like their life on social media. You won't find a lot of narcissists on social media, but if they are, most likely it's hidden. They have secret accounts under different names. They hide it, and they do their work behind the scenes under aliases and stuff.
That's a lot to unpack right now.
Yes, yeah, there's so much, right? Like they don't want people seeing their life. They like to keep things private.
Very private.
Right? Because a lot of times they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, right? And that's where things like in marriage and stuff, you have infidelity, you know, there's ways that they go about it. They're very smart in when it comes to stuff like that, at deception and
covering it up,
as well. The other thing would be, I've got them all on the
it's
top
okay.
of my head, but
you did mention 3 important ones that people should look out for.
There's 4 steps in breaking free. That if I can touch on those, I think it will give people, I think it'll give people a really good solid foundation to start with. So whether you're in the relationship, you're still with them, or you're thinking of leaving, or you've just figured out, oh my goodness, like, yes, like my partner is narcissistic. Definitely. There's no empathy, no lack, no remorse. That was another one. They have no remorse. If they hurt you, they cannot identify like normal people with the same remorse. If anything, that guilt and shame comes back again. And what they'll do is project that onto that person. That's how they victimize people too. They will project whatever they're doing. So if they're carrying guilt, they're going to try to project that onto you. They're going to spin the situation, deflect it, and twist it. There's different terms for that too, which I'll get into another time. But for time's sake, 4 steps that if you're looking to break free from a narcissistic relationship, you do have to be strategic. You're not dealing with just a toxic person. Okay, there is a difference between a toxic person and a narcissist. Okay, they are not just toxic, they can be dangerous. Okay, and in certain situations, narcissists can be violent. They can go from a rage and get physically violent. So there are different steps you got to do. But the first thing in breaking free is going to be knowledge. You've got to know what you're dealing with. So what do? Research. Now, where you get your research from is also very important, okay? There's a lot of coaching out there these days on social media. There's a lot of people talking about narcissism more than
even on Google, there's a lot of information on Google as well.
So. Yes, which Google helped me because that was where my whole journey started. I Googled, why do men give the silent treatment? And I think I told you a few hours later, I'm in this deep rabbit hole of narcissism. And I'm like, and all the pieces were just coming together. So knowledge is a big component when it comes to breaking free. Because if you don't know, it's like if you're trapped in a maze. If you don't know where you are and you don't remember where the exit was, or if you're in a house, right? If you don't mark your exit points in that house, how are you going to get out?
You'll never get out.
You won't. So you have to know what you're dealing with a narcissist. So where do you do research? Well, I personally, I will look into psychology because you've got 3 components with narcissism and abuse. You've got the psychology side of it. You've got the mental side of it, right? That, you learn mentally, like you understand mentally and your emotions. Then you've got the spiritual side of it, right? You have to have all 3 components when you're getting knowledge. So I like to encourage people to read from resources of people who have degrees, people who are educated, that know what they're talking about in this topic.
This topic, yeah.
Right? So there's different professors out there. There's different psychologists. Dr. Ramani is one of them. She has been around for years. She is a professional. She's a psychologist that deals specifically with narcissistic abuse. She knows her stuff. That was where I got a lot of my knowledge from. There's books out there on narcissistic abuse recovery from psychologists as well, and Christian psychologists too. There's more and more people becoming aware in the church and in Christian circles. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're in that Christian circle where we're women of God and we have faith in God, and that's the basis and foundation of my life. And so God was the big part of that, right? So the other thing is so it's knowledge you're going to get from research, reading books, speaking to psychologists. Because
if I may come in there, some people might say, I don't have money to buy the books, but there's so many free materials as well, so if you don't have the money to buy the books, you can also get free materials.
Absolutely, yes. And social media. I mean, you do have to kind of sift through. You do have to be careful because there's a lot of people out there that are sharing about narcissistic abuse that have been through it.
Yeah.
And they just may be at different stages in their healing journey. And depending where they are, if you're not careful, sometimes we can get caught up. Misery loves misery, they say. And that's not to slight people that are going through it. I'm still healing, but I don't want to come on a platform angry or resentful or saying things in a gossiping way where it's going to hurt the other person. Because like I say, and this is my thoughts on it, on how I see it when I'm sharing about my experience or my story, is that this is not about bashing my ex-husband or my ex-boyfriend. This is about getting knowledge out to other people to help them. But I still have hope for the narcissist because I know God can set people free. I've seen it. I've seen what God has done. I've seen what he's done in my own life, how he's helped me to heal and to recover from this. Because this is not just an ordinary, like I said, this is not just a toxic relationship. You're dealing with a dangerous mentality here with these people. You know, they want to break you down, literally. They want to
if possible, kill you, actually.
What's that?
And if possible, kill you.
Yes, that can happen as well. You know, when they lose control. Controlling is another trait, by the way, just to speak about that quick.
That makes sense. Fine.
Controlling is another trait of narcissists. They're very, very controlling. It's all about control. In fact, that's the basis of the whole disorder and the whole personality is they need to be in control because control brings safety, makes it, but it's a false safety. Because controlling people, whether that's by manipulation, coercion, physical abuse, put downs, you know, insulting and demeaning people, that is the wrong kind of control. That's not healthy. But those are the tactics they use to control the people in their lives, right? So the foundation of narcissism to me is all about control. And so where it gets dangerous, depending on the level of narcissism with that person, like with narcissism, there can be comorbidities that go with that. So they could also have schizophrenia or PTSD. A lot of people with narcissism have PTSD or CPTSD from the trauma that they went through as a child that caused them to be narcissistic. Does that make sense?
Somehow I'm beginning to kind of feel pity for them, right?
You can. It's sad because at the end of the day, it's like a trickle effect, a domino effect. You've got the narcissist who's been suffering for years in this prison. They're literally in a prison in their own mind and they can't get out. And a lot of them will never get out because you think of it, since you're a child, you know, that emotional development was cut. It was cut. That child didn't know they were doing it. It was a survival mechanism. So from the moment that child went through that trauma, whatever that was, you know, it could have been a continual trauma. So then they end up with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which basically it's like PTSD, but PTSD is a sudden trauma. So think of war veterans, people that go to war, right? That's PTSD. Those are sudden cases of trauma that have happened in their life. CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, that is chronic trauma that happens over years, right? And so most narcissistic people, survivors, have CPTSD, right? But we don't need to walk in that because God can heal. God can set us free. I've been set free from it. I know God has healed
And
me.
so can you.
Yes, it is 100% able and like possible to do
Fantastic.
that. So yes, so that's where it can become dangerous is where they begin to feel they're losing control. And a lot of people will tell you that in the few days leading up to a lot of people leaving, especially women, the statistics are higher for women. In the last end days of them beginning to leave the situation, whether it's the house or, or they just go. You have to have strategies. You have to have a strategic plan to leave, because some narcissists, depending how high their traits are, or the NPD, or if they're a sociopath, or, there's other types that go, depending on the scale, how high they are. It can be dangerous for them. That's when they say most things will happen, is when the woman tries to leave. That's when things can get bad. So you have to have a plan. So getting back to those 4 points, sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place here.
The first one was
it's so much information, is knowledge.
The second one is strategic.
So number 2 is plan. You have to have a plan. You've got to know, you've got to be 2 steps ahead of your partner, the person that you're trying to leave. You've got to know what you're doing. You've got to know that, okay, let's just say, like in my case, we couldn't separate physically for quite some time. When I asked for the divorce, we had to stay in the same house for a while. Okay, so imagine how uncomfortable that is, and how it can be tense with that narcissistic dynamic, right? So you don't have privacy. And when the narcissist finds out they're losing that control and you're leaving, and a lot of times they're not going to believe it, because especially in my case, if you stayed for so many years and they had so much control over you, and the same techniques worked.
24 years?
Yeah.
That's a long
so
time.
If their techniques like gaslighting, devaluing, and then love bombing, and going through that cycling up, down, and lying, and all those things, if that's all working to keep you subdued and not leave, when you finally come to the time where you're like, you're done,
I'm done,
and you're leaving, it's very difficult for them to accept the fact that you're leaving. They can't absorb it. They can't understand, like, darn it, like, where did she get this power from?
Why is it not working anymore?
Right. And so that's going to cause a lot of anxiety while you're living with them, waiting to make that part. And then you've got lawyers involved, and, you've got the whole divorce process, because not only are you, if you're married, right, you're not only dealing now with the fact of going through a divorce, which is hard enough. A divorce is very traumatic, right? But you add the narcissistic component to this.
Wow, that's a bomb.
Girl, you've got a tornado. But again, there's hope, there's hope. It's just, if you have a plan and you follow certain steps, then you can get there. You'll get there. I got through it. I'm here 4 years later, and then I ended up getting derailed into another relationship after my divorce, even for a couple of years, and I've even come back from that. So the comeback, the healing is 100% possible. But you have to give yourself the time, but you've got to do it strategically. So you're going to get knowledge, learn what narcissism is, what are the traits, what are things that they do when you're going through a divorce. So that's where social media can come in. You can find different coaches or psychologists that talk about things to watch out for when you're going through the divorce. So here's an example. One example is, if you're going through the divorce and you've got, important documents, say from lawyers or the bank, because there's a lot of different things you're going to go through. And you're living in the same house, you need to be cautious of where you're leaving your information.
Because you don't want them to see it, right?
Right. It sounds like you're being the narcissist, you're being sneaky, you're hiding things, you're doing, but you have to do it because it's going to protect you, because you're in a battlefield. It's a battlefield. I'm going to call it what it is.
It's what it is,
a battlefield. It is. So you're in a battle, and it's so, and so this is where it's hard, Anita, because you've been married to this person for so many years. You slept with this person. You ate with this person. You had their children. You went to church with them. You did so many things. And here's the thing. It wasn't always bad. There were good times. There were great times. You went on trips and stuff. But there'd be these little pockets of tension and fights that would come out of nowhere, and you'd be scratching your head like, what?
Kind of confused, right?
Right? Yeah. So, but those good times were there, and that's sometimes what keeps people stuck too, because you're like, oh, but he was so good when he did this, and
Yeah.
he took me away, or he bought me jewelry, and you know, he told me he loved me and everything, but yet they're still carrying on living their life.
You just want to kind of hold on to those little
yes, yes, and that's where it's difficult, because and they will know that. They're very smart. They will know what it takes to hook you and to keep you subdued and to keep you hooked. Right? They know exactly, especially after years. They know. They read you. They know you inside out. What's crazy is you don't know them. And so that's my next point. The third point that's going to help you break free from this is acceptance. Acceptance is the biggest thing, Anita. If you're having a difficult time accepting the fact that this is what you're in, this is what you're dealing with. And again, I always tell people, speak to your family doctor. Ask to speak to a social worker or a professional. If you work someplace, a lot of places have what's called EAP, or they have resources where you can get free counseling. So, you know, where I worked, I had access to counseling for free, and you can speak to a therapist, you can speak to people, because you know you need validation. Because your friends and family aren't going to understand. I'm going to tell you right now, be very cautious who you choose to tell your story to, and who you reach out to for support, because support's another part of that connection of breaking the breaking free. Is you need support. You're going to need support. And unfortunately, if people are not familiar with narcissistic abuse, or they've never been through it, okay, it's going to be very difficult for them to understand, and they're going to make you feel worse. You're going to feel worse. And that's
feel
why
like you're crazy, and they're going to make you feel like validate your craziness.
Right? And then you're going to end up, a lot of times, you'll end up staying, because you don't have anyone to talk to. No one's believing you, or no one understands it. Or they'll say things like, well, why don't you just go? Just leave. But it's
not that easy to just up and leave.
It's not. And this is, again, this isn't to cause friction between family and friends that don't understand. They honestly just don't know. It's ignorance, right? It's a lack of knowledge. They just don't know. You know, you can't teach them about it overnight. This is something that people also want to learn. They have to want to understand what you're going through. And for some people, if you just begin to share, like even when I've shared with you, it can be a little overwhelming. It's like, wow, this is a lot to take in. And so for some people, they can't do it. They cannot be a support system to you. So that's where therapy, family doctors, asking them for resources, reaching out. There is a lot of online therapy as well, but always make sure that they specialize, or they have education or experience with narcissistic abuse. That's very,
they have
very
what
important.
it takes to help.
Yes. So if you're using services from your work or your doctor that's free, that's fantastic. But make sure and inquire, ask, do they have experience with narcissistic abuse? Okay. So that's the knowledge part. That is acceptance. So acceptance, though, is going to take time. Okay. You're not going to overnight be like, oh yes, my husband was a narcissist, and everything that I believed was all fake. I thought that we were in love, but we weren't, because they don't have the capability to love. They do not have the capability to love like we do. It is different. A lot of it is conditional. It's conditional. It's transactional. If you've ever heard the term transactional love in a relationship, more than likely you're dealing with a narcissistic person, because they will only love you and show love and acts of love to get something back in return. That's the difference. That's another trait, is it's a conditional type of love. Like if they give you $100, you will hear about it for 20 years later. They have this mental little thing, which some people, listen, there are toxic people that do stuff like that. They're not a narcissist, but a narcissist is like that. They cannot love you. It's very
typical for them.
Yes, and they cannot love you genuinely. They can't. If they're doing something nice for you, or they're telling you they love you, they love to tell you that they love you. They'll say it 1,000,000 times a day, but it's not from here.
Yeah.
It's not the heart. It's not genuine.
How do you
It's
decide though that it's not? I mean, I know. I'm sorry.
by their actions. By their actions.
By the actions. Okay.
Yes.
Because it's important to decide that this
Yes.
is not, this is not genuine love. Because for someone who never felt loved
That's
growing up,
right.
and then you
right.
meet someone who is always saying, "I love you. You are
Mm-hmm.
this. You are that," and that can be like, that can be kind of make you feel that
Yes.
person love you.
Yes.
And it'll be
Yeah.
difficult for you to leave. Like, how is it that this person tells me he loves me,
Right.
or she loves me,
Right.
and then he or she's doing this to me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that would go back to red flags. Is the number one thing I learned is that if their actions are not lining up with their words, that is a huge red flag. You need to go. If you're dating someone and they're telling you, it starts off with little things like, "Oh, I'll call you at 7:00 on Friday," because they know that you work and you have a busy schedule, and they just don't even call you at all. That's a red flag. These are not consistent people. Their behavior has to be consistent. And it's not that people sometimes don't make mistakes or they got to cancel or they got to do something, but to just ghost you and not contact you and not talk to you for a couple of days.
Nothing.
No. We don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
That's a no.
Yeah, you have to have consistency. And so they are very inconsistent with their behaviors, okay? Also, their moods change very, very quickly, okay? They'll go from like, "Oh, hi, I love you, and everything is great," and they're all happy and everything, and you're out having dinner and everything's great. And then you could just say one thing and it's not a big deal, and their reaction will not warrant for what was said or what you do. Like, they're extreme. Okay, they can go from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. That is not normal behavior. That's not normal. Someone yelling and screaming at you, right? Yeah. So actions and words got to line up. Okay. Those are for the red flags. That's a red flag.
So what's the last? You talked about 4 steps.
So we talked about 3. Knowledge. We talked
one?
about acceptance, accepting it, which again is going to take time. Don't beat yourself up. It's going to take time. You're going to heal, and then you're going to go back, and then you're going to move a little forward, and then you're going to be back. You're going to have days where you're going to wake up and be like, "Whoa, this is all a nightmare. This is not happening. This cannot be happening," right? So acceptance takes time. That's a part of the healing process. So you
talk about planning,
being strategic. When you're going through, say, a divorce and you're still living in the same home, for financial reasons or whatever, or just the time it's taking for the divorce to take place. Take documents with you. Take anything you don't want them to know. You must take it with you. It's a pain. It sucks that we have to do this, but it's for your better good and your children and your safety, right? Don't leave things around, like even your phone. Don't leave your phone laying around. I had mine stolen.
Lord.
He stole my phone because I had evidence of certain things. And I just left my phone for a minute in the kitchen, and I came back and he went out, and this is during the separation process, and my phone was gone. He took it and I never got it back. And so anything that has information or any important documentation, banking stuff, you have to be cautious. You have to be aware. The other thing is
the 4th one, yeah?
This is not the 4th point, but about planning and being strategic. Even when you're in the home and you're having conversations, and I know most people, as you begin to get the knowledge, you will learn these things about planning and being strategic, but you can't even have conversations on the phone around them. You have to go outside or go for a drive. You have to yes, they are going to, and they're very sneaky. They are going to
oh my goodness.
Check everything, try to listen to everything. They want to be 2 steps ahead of you. And usually they can be. But when you get the knowledge, you'll learn and you'll know those things. The 4th thing, and this is the biggest, I always save the best to last. The 4th thing to break free is God. You must have a relationship with God. And I know that there's people watching that maybe you don't believe in God, maybe you're an atheist, maybe you're in Eastern philosophies and all that stuff. And it's not that you can't break free from narcissistic abuse or relationship. Obviously you can. But in my experience and many other people, and it's not just narcissistic abuse that God can deliver you from. He can deliver you from addictions like alcoholism, drug addictions,
anything,
sexual addiction, everything and anything. He can set you free, because this is not the only thing I've been set free from in my life. In my past, I've been set free from other things as well. And so God is the ultimate chain breaker. Right, girl? He is the chain breaker. And you need to have that. I honestly believe that with God, that is going to be your ultimate power to break the bond from him and break free from a narcissist. Because the word gives you power. The word transforms your mind, because your mind is going to be a mess. When you're coming out of this, your mind is a mess.
It's going to be all over the place.
You don't know up from down, left to right. Your brain fog is a symptom. One time we'll talk about the symptoms of narcissistic abuse. We can maybe do a topic on that one day.
We're going to keep having you back. We keep sharing knowledge, because people need to be set free.
They do. And it's a painful experience. My heart, if you're going through that right now, my heart goes out to you, because I've been through it twice, and it's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to go through is to break free and to come out of that and to have to heal and regroup. But that's the fourth step in breaking free, is a relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, and letting him come into your heart and into your life, and giving him that opportunity to bring healing. And, and I tried, even after my marriage, I did try therapy. I did therapy, and there is a place for therapy, 100%. There's a place for everything. But this last situation I just got out of, it was like, honestly, it took me to a whole other level with God. So I'm actually thankful. And you will come to a place, it's hard to accept this and understand, how could my narcissist make my life better? How could this be a good lesson for me? But you know what it taught me? It taught me a few things. I had low self-worth. I did not value myself. And I didn't know my identity in Christ. I didn't know who I really was. Because when you put your identity in Christ, when you get to know who you are in him, you won't settle for anything less than the best.
Wow.
And you'll want to be your best for that person. Because it's not just about what we're going to get. It's not just, well, he's got to have this, and this. Who are you? What are you bringing to the table? And I encourage people to, this is where I made a mistake in the second relationship that I got involved with. I didn't take the time to heal from my divorce. I was vulnerable, I was naive, and I was hurting. And I'd also just lost my mother at the same time.
I think that probably made it very easy for you to...
That attention right away, someone telling me how much they loved me and all this stuff, was like, oh, this is fantastic. So I always advise too, and part of breaking free is staying free. And that's a whole other topic, is how do you stay free once you get out? How do you stay free?
We can just go on and on and on. And there's so much to unpack. There's so much to say. There's so much to share. I just want to say thank you for these 4 steps you've shared. And I just want to quickly ask a few questions, because some people have a few questions they're asking and they just want to know. So let me just quickly add to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is the very first step? You kind of hinted on it, but if you could just quickly and in a short words tell us what the very first step to do when you realize that you are in an abusive relationship, and toxic relationship, and you want to break free. Just itemize it.
Okay. So honestly, taking a deep breath. You are going to be very emotional when you realize what you've been in. You're going to have, it's almost like death. Okay, when you lose someone that you love, when you lose something close to you, a parent, a friend, a sibling, a child, you're going to go through grief. Be prepared for grief. Grief is going to be what you're going to experience. That's what you can expect. You're going to go through a grieving process. And what does that look like? It's almost the same as a death of a loved one. You're going to feel shock. Your body's going to go into shock because your body has been living in survival mode for how very long you were in the relationship. You've been living in survival mode. Okay. Your nervous system is hypervigilant. It's in survival. You're on edge. I mean, I know, and it can still happen to me this day. If there's a sudden bang or a sudden noise, or there's somewhere I am and there's so much talking and there's stuff, my anxiety will start going through the ceiling. Okay, that's my nervous system. It's also hypervigilance. You become hypervigilant when you are living with a narcissist, when you are involved, whether it's a parent, a partner, whatever. You begin to become hypervigilant like them. You almost take on that trait of hypervigilance. So it's going to be grief. You've got to go through the grieving process, shock, anger, denial, and then the acceptance will slowly start coming. That fits into that grieving component. Acceptance will come in with grieving, okay? But the first step is take a deep breath and be so kind to yourself. Because you're going to come at yourself. You're going to be like,
to be kind to someone else, but sometimes we miss it. We're not kind to ourselves.
Yes, you're going to be like, how did I not see this? Oh my gosh. I lived here. I was in this for so many years. How did I not see it? How did I let this go by? I'm so stupid. Oh my gosh. Like, what was I thinking? No. This is the shock. Yeah. So grieving.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, my next question is, how can someone create a safety plan for leaving a toxic and abusive partner, especially if they feel isolated or afraid?
Okay, so if you're in a situation where it is very, very likely that you've been physically abused already in this relationship, which in my case, in my marriage, I did not experience that. Thank God I didn't go through physical abuse. In that situation, if you're feeling that your life could be in danger, you need to reach out to your local shelters. You need to reach out. I know in Hamilton, Sasha is one of them. I believe that's an organization for women that are in domestic violence. And keep in mind, again, psychological harm, which is emotional abuse by narcissism, is also domestic violence. It's domestic violence. It's not just bruises and scars and physical abuse. So even if you haven't been physically abused by the narcissist, this is very important. If you've never been physically assaulted by them, do not think it can't happen. Like I said earlier, in the stages where you're beginning to get ready to leave the relationship, that is when it can isolate or escalate. That's when a lot of women have been. It's not to scare people, it's to educate you, to let you know.
So you know and you're prepared.
You are prepared. So if you start seeing erratic behavior, close to the time when you're about to leave, or you're going through the divorce process, or you may have to go to court, and, they could start raging or breaking things or threatening you, or that is assault. That is assault. You also have the right to call 911, to call the police. If you're ever being cornered or you feel in danger, call the police or, reach out to a friend. But if it's imminent danger that you're feeling unsafe, that things could go wrong really quick, call the police. Call the police or get somebody to come and get you.
What legal or community resources should people know about that can assist them?
Okay, so great question. So in my situation, I did not just get a lawyer. What I did was I got a mediator who worked with the lawyer, okay? There is a difference between just a mediator. If someone is offering mediation services, please make sure that mediator also is qualified for legal documentation and has contact or works with a lawyer. Because otherwise you're going to pay $3,000 to $4,000 for just a mediator who at a certain point in a narcissistic relationship or divorce, you are going to need legal advice. You need a lawyer. I'm telling you right now, anybody right now who's in a marriage with a narcissist and you know it and you know what you're dealing with, or highly narcissistic, okay, you need to get a lawyer. And so what I did is I got a mediator that worked with the lawyer. She worked for him. Okay. So because with mediators, you're going to pay the $3,000 to $4,000, and then this narcissist, your partner, they're going to pull something on you. They're going to pull out some trick out of their hat, and what's going to happen is the mediator is going to come back and say, well, I can't deal with that. That's out of their jurisdiction, right? They're not going to be able to deal with that. Now you've just spent $3,000 to $4,000 on a mediator. Now you got to go to a lawyer, and you're looking at another $4,000 or $5,000, maybe $10,000. Okay.
Wow. That's
So
gonna be a lot.
so I highly in a volatile divorce with a narcissistic person, please get a lawyer or a mediator that works with a lawyer that can document and do all the legal documentation and represent you. Okay. That's very important. There was one other thing that you asked in that question that's important. There was that. What was
Well, I said what legal or community resources people should know about that can assist them.
So legal aid, that's what I meant. If you don't, because most of us don't have access to a lawyer, you can't afford it. And a lot of times, I'm going to say this too, in narcissistic relationships, one thing that's very common, unfortunately, especially if children are involved, the narcissist, this partner, whether it's let's just use a male in this case, okay? If the husband, and there's children involved, if he was the main provider, okay, and the woman stayed home most of the time, and let's even say she doesn't have credit of her own or whatever. Luckily for me in my situation, I was okay with that, but a lot of women are not because they gave up everything to stay home and raise the children and take care of the family, and they don't have those means. And so the partner, the narcissistic partner, will use and weaponize their financial stability, their working, and their access to money, and they can lock accounts, they can cut off, and this happens a lot. It's horrible, and my heart goes out to these people. I had a bit of a similar situation. Kind of some things happened in my situation where he tried to do that, but in some cases a woman won't have a choice, and they will cut them off financially. They'll lock bank accounts, they'll put stops on certain accounts or credit cards, so that they're hoping that that's going to break her down financially, that she can't leave, that she'll come back. And this happens so often. And that's why when people say to women or to men, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave? I apologize for all of those people that have said that to you if you've been in that situation, because they don't understand that a lot of times there's a financial restriction for the woman to leave. She can't, and she's got children that she's got to take with her or stay in the house. So that's another thing. And legal aid is a resource in your community that provides free legal service as well. That's another,
Okay, so the fourth question is, what steps can they take to regain their confidence and rebuild their life after leaving?
Ooh, that's a big question. That could be a separate video.
Just few tips on that, and then,
to rebuild themselves,
gain confidence, and because it's possible to lose your confidence in this.
Will you will lose your confidence. Your confidence after being with someone like that. They break you down, and that's their whole purpose in your life. If you were this shining light, happy-go-lucky person when you met them, you won't be that at the end of the relationship. In fact, many people don't even recognize themselves at the end of a relationship. you're tired, you're exhausted. Some people even age faster.
Wow.
They will age because of the stress in your body, internally, your nervous system.
And there's only so much your body can take, right?
Right. You don't eat properly. Like one thing that saved me, and I'm going to say, because this is part of my testimony, one part of that helped me through the 24 years was I had a home gym and I worked out 4 or 5 days a week. I've been working out over 28 years. If I never had worked out as often as I did and stayed fit, and because working out releases dopamine and oxytocin, right? Those feel-good chemicals, because you're not getting them in the marriage. You're not going to get that, right? So that working out, that exercise literally was a big part of saving me through all of that.
It kept you busy.
It kept my mind clear.
It
kept my mind clear, kept me sharp, kept me focused. So I do encourage people as well, a part of rebuilding, get active. And I know it's going to be the last thing on your mind is to get active. And I'm not talking about joining a gym and doing like intense exercises. Just go for walks. Go for a walk.
Something very
Go
little,
for a
not
10-minute walk,
20-minute
walk in nature. You know, maybe if you have a friend that you can trust, that you can be with, and don't even, make time. Part of the rebuilding and coming through this, don't always talk about it. And I know it's hard because you want people to hear you.
Sympathize
you're
with
screaming.
you.
You're to validate what you're going through. You want to scream at the top of your lungs what you've been through because it's crazy. It's crazy when you wake up out of this. It's almost like you were in a coma. Like you weren't even alive. Like you were kept in this coma. And when you come out, you're like, what the heck? You're learning to adapt to society again and to build relationships. So if you go for walks and you go with a friend or you get out or you do join a gym or you do stuff,
go to the
try
beach.
not to talk about it when you're doing those things.
Okay.
Try to focus in that moment of the walk on the beach.
And just
or
enjoy it, right?
A cup of tea or lunch with a friend, ask them about what's going on in their life. And now I say all this, but trust me, it was hard for me not to talk about what I was going through. And there is a time to talk about it, right? Just make sure it's with the right people. But that's a part of the rebuilding is you're going to have to get to know yourself all over again. And you know what? There's a great part to this. Can I tell you? And this is where we can maybe finish off on this is bring in where the motorcycle picture fits in, because I didn't know you were going to put a picture of me on the motorcycle in the ad.
Loved it. When I saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, and the way you looked back, like I have broken free.
Right. So a part of the rebuilding your life again that is exciting, and this is where you have this, and this will take time, trust me. I'm years out, right? Like I'm 4 years out, even though I just went through something recently. I had been mentally out of it for a long time. I just had to physically separate from it. But the rebuilding, what's awesome is you can reinvent yourself.
You're never too old and it's never too late to reinvent
You're
yourself.
never too old and it's never too late to start something new. Maybe there's a hobby you wanted to do when you were younger, but you never got to. That was me. So I went and got my motorcycle license a year ago, and I bought myself a motorcycle, and I go riding now. And I'm telling you,
maybe I will have the courage one day.
Yes, so I can at least take you for a ride.
I'm going to pass out.
It's a lot of fun. But yes, the rebuilding, look at it as a good time to start something you never got to do, something you always wanted to do, but you just never ever had the time because you're so consumed in the relationship because they will suck everything out of you. You don't have a life of your own. And anyone watching this that knows they're in a relationship or marriage with a narcissist will tell you, you don't have a life of your own. You are all about serving them. It's all around them. So go out and live, begin to live, find new hobbies, maybe take chef school, go learn how to cook if you never
go learn how to paint.
Whatever you do, join a church group or a support group, That's the part of rebuilding that's exciting.
So let's quickly run. I never thought this would get to 1 hour. Unfortunately, it's but there's so much to share.
We did this the last time.
There's just, there's so much to share. There's so much you need to unpack, you need to, I
Yes,
don't know.
there's
People,
a lot.
I am so passionate about setting people free,
Yes,
So whatever I need
yes.
to do, even if it goes beyond 1
Yeah,
hour,
yeah. They
I
can
mean,
pause it and come back
people
another
watch
time.
movies for 2 hours,
This is
3 hours.
Or
So-
scroll.
or
We
scroll,
for
time-
2-3 hours.
Exactly. So why
And you're
can't
not
you
even getting anything valuable,
So I can't just
right?
spend hours watching something that is gonna, help you, set you free.
Right.
Anyway, let's just quickly run through the last
Yes,
three
yes.
questions. So, we talked about the steps they can take, right? Now, how can they overcome financial or logistical barriers? I don't know if you want to talk about that. You did mention a bit of, maybe just keep through that question. Let's just ask the last two questions.
Sure.
What advice would you give someone who wants to help a loved one trapped in a toxic or abusive relationship?
Okay, so advice to someone helping somebody.
Yeah,
that's
because
in
sometimes it's not you, it's not me that is in it, but I know
Right.
someone who is in it and I want to help, but I don't know what to do.
Okay. I would say number one, learn to be a good listener. Just listen. You're going to want to fix it because you're going to see how broken these people are. You're going to see just how much damage a narcissistic relationship can do to somebody. That's why it's called narcissistic abuse.
Yeah.
It is abuse. It is not toxic. It's abuse and it's wrong. And they're going to be hurting. Okay. They're also not going to trust easily. Okay. It's important for those supporting people with narcissistic abuse because of so much gaslighting and distrust and hypervigilance in that relationship, no matter how long it was. You could be in it just for a year and they can do a lot of damage. Okay. It's important to know that they're navigating their way through a whole new territory. They are so brokenhearted. A lot of people, I went through depression after my marriage. I went through a period of depression. I did not want to get up for the longest time. I had no energy. I stopped even working out, even though it was probably the most important thing I needed at the time. I couldn't pray. So my advice would be, become a good listener and do the things you can do for them, like even taking them out for lunch or making a meal and coming over and making the meal and bringing it to them and just sitting with them. Have a cup of tea, bring some desserts over. We all love desserts, right? Everyone's got a sweet tooth, right? Bring over something and, just spend time with them. Don't think ahead. What have I got to say? What should I say? What should I do? Just, you know what? Just do services. How can you serve them? Not fix them, but how could you serve them? Maybe they need a ride to the lawyer's office. Maybe they don't have a car. I got to go to my lawyer's office, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. It's those practical things you can do as a friend to support them the best.
It might be little, but
it's significant. Like I remember when I was going through all of this, I had one girlfriend that would just call me up randomly during the day. I could be at work and, working is tough when you're going through this too. It's so hard to stay focused. And she'd just call and say, hey, just checking in. How you doing? Is there anything you need? Do you have enough groceries? Do you need me to stop and get something for you? Right? It's the practical things that you have no idea. It goes so far for somebody that's just coming out of this, right? Maybe it's financial. Not everybody can give financially, but maybe financially you can help. And just being there, pray. If you're a believer, you got to pray and ask. I always ask, right? Like, can I pray for you? Because one of the hardest things for me to do was to pray. I couldn't pray. I was so mentally exhausted. I couldn't even pray. But one thing I would do, and this is a tip in the rebuilding component of the question you asked me, is one thing that I did when I was going through that helped me a lot is the audio Bible. Pull
That's
out
so
your
helpful.
Bible.
I have that and I use it all the time.
Yes. Because you're going to be in that place. You're going to be, the last thing you're going to want to do, and I'm just being real, the last thing you want to do is pull out your Bible and start reading or praying, right? You can't, you're just so mentally done. You're exhausted. And God understands. Don't
That's
let...
the thing. God understands.
Yes, he knows everything.
He's got your back.
Yes, and you don't need people telling you. Don't get caught up with religious people that are going to tell you, pray this many times a day and do this. No, there's going to be a season you can't. That's where friends come alongside and say, can I pray for you? Can I pray for you? You know, they may not want to go to church.
Yeah.
I stopped going to church during my divorce. I stopped because I couldn't deal with the connection to my family as well as having to deal with, you know, because people talk, you know, and people have their ideas and assumptions when people really don't know anything about the situation, you know. Plus, one thing I got to tell you, because this would fit into this, is narcissists do something that is called a smear campaign. This is a real term. This is a real psychological term that they do. What they will do, we talked about control earlier, is if they lose control of you, they'll try to control you through how they tell other people about the story. So this happens in church too, and it happened to me. My ex was going and telling people and his own family, you know, he was saying things that weren't true. He was making things up to control the narrative of the divorce and the story. Oh, she did this, and she's a common thing that they will do is they will make.
And so when you come to tell them your version of the story, they think you're crazy.
Yes, because they make you out to look that way. And again, it almost looks like, well, you could be, because when you find these things out, that they're making up all these lies, not only are you getting your head around that you just woke up out of a coma and you don't know what you've been in for 20, 25 years or 5 years, but you're also hearing that they're talking this stuff about you and saying things that aren't even true. And you're like, oh, like this is where some people, some of the survivors, there's another term called reactive abuse, and I would love to come back and talk about that.
You're going to be back
a hot topic.
over and over and over again.
Yes, because reactive abuse is something that needs to be shared and talked about because it's not enough yet, and that's where the survivor snaps. And the survivor will look like the narcissist. They will rage. They will break things.
Because it bottled things so much. And at that moment, it just, you know, snap.
It just comes out. You know, you get tired of being devalued and put down and cheated on and lied to. And the greatest thing, and it's not the greatest thing, I'm being sarcastic, but the craziest thing is they'll stay calm as a cucumber, because they, you know what, they know she's beginning to boil, or he's beginning. If it's the opposite and it's the female narcissist, they're watching him. And for men, it's harder because they naturally have more aggression in them that God gave them to protect us and for good reason, right? So if you get the female narcissist in the man's face and she's poking the bear, that man's going to have an even harder time to control himself, right? And it's going to come out more than likely breaking and smashing and stuff like that, where women, it could be like an intense, like crying and breaking
Yelling
down
or
on
shouting
the floor,
or
shouting, yelling. This is all reactive abuse. But what happens is the narcissist knows it's coming and they're almost ready for it. And a lot of times, girl, they'll even have the camera in their hand recording it. And they'll go and say, you see, it's
evidence
her.
Against you.
She's crazy.
Oh my God,
or
crazy.
He's crazy. Look at what he's doing, right? It's true, girl. So that'll be another topic, but
Oh my goodness, we definitely have to have this. We can go on and on and on. I don't want this to be 2 hours, 3 hours.
No.
So I think I just have one last question, and I'll just, if you could just quickly run through it. What simple, empowering action can someone take today to start reclaiming their power and freedom?
Learn your identity in Christ. I'm going to say that's probably the number one thing. You've got to know who you are. Read the word, right? Read the word. If you can't and you're just coming out, go online and look up things, right? Begin to know who you are. What's your identity? Go back to your values. Go back to your values. Knowing your values and your morals, your boundaries, those are going to be very, very important.
So you know what you should accept, what you should not accept, you know?
Right. Like, accept this is where you are. As hard as it is, like I said, the acceptance is a big part of it. That's a big step. is getting free, is acceptance. And once you start to accept it, even just enough to move forward, to empower yourself, but that's what you got to do, is learn, get back to who you are. Learn, tell yourself, look in the mirror, tell yourself, I am valuable, I am worthy, I am loved. You know, I am the daughter of a king.
Sometimes you need to speak these things to yourself.
You do.
Look at yourself in the mirror and just say these things.
Yes. It changes.
Oh, wow.
Changes. Yeah.
I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yes.
But we're definitely going to have you back.
Awesome. I would love to. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving. I want to say thank you to you, Anita, for what you're doing. You're giving people a platform to share their story. And stories are powerful because, you know, one person may not relate to my story. They may be like, well, I this isn't for me. I can't relate to this, right? But somebody, even if it's just one person, hears someone's story and they become encouraged and empowered and realize if they can do it, if they can get free, I can get free too. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for having me and letting me share my story.
And thank you for your willingness to share.